Hello, Uggies Worldwide. I'm Dave Kassler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with this week's Commentariat. This is Commentariat number 9, and today is the 5th of April. We're going to go through comments and comment on the comments, and of course, you are welcome to comment on the comments on the comments. Okay, and here we go. This one is from Bart Van Allen about the video I made about the 803 tube. He says, love the valves. Now, valves is the British term and is probably more descriptive of what it does. And tube is more descriptive of what it is. This, as you can see, is a big glass tube. And the components are in it. This is a pentode. And what it does is by varying the voltage on the screen grid, you can vary the current on the output, and it'll amplify quite significantly. This is a power amplifier tube. Very interesting tube. He says, still keep the old HW that's a Heath kit, HW101 and Sugarbaker's SB200, just because they are valve operated. Sorry if you don't like the Brits term. No, the Brits term is fine, and it's more descriptive of what the tube actually does. But it's a valve. It turns on and modulates the current flow. Okay. Monty Bates, when I talked about the Wild 103, I lit the filament in it and said this was just amazing to watch, an 80-year-old tube, quite interesting. John Bauman, 3 hours ago, said, thank you for the proper connecting sequence for ham radio. And I guess he liked that. Back to the tube, a lot of the comments are on the 803. In high school TV electronics, we repaired televisions for the cost of parts and voluntary donations. And then it says in his second year, we had a rash of horizontal sweep problems in tube sets. The horizontal sweep in an old tube was tracing the line across. And then the vertical sweep would drop at a line, come back, and trace again. It wasn't quite like that. The trace was not quite straight, so that it would come back and then trace again as this vertical thing took it down. It took a lot of power to move that beam back and forth so rapidly. So they used fairly hefty tubes to do them. 6KD6 was one of them. I know a lot of the tube type, or I'll call them hybrid radios of the time. The Japanese radios had a tube driver and a tube final, and everything else was transistorized. And some of them, like Yaesu, used the sweep tubes because they were quite powerful. However, they're easily damaged. Not by burning out the filament per se, but by changing the electrical characteristics of the tube by running too much current through it. Anyway, he says, we saw it enough to know to check the sweep tubes, typically 6KD6, for a melted hole in the glass envelope. In the failure mode, the plate would get hot enough to melt the glass, and the hottest spot would be pulled in by the vacuum and would vent the tube, thus serving as a kind of badly designed fuse. Yeah, the sweep tubes, which back then were readily available for cheap, that was one of the selling points, like my Yaesu FT101B has sweep tube finals. I've got the original sweep tubes in there. They're still good. But it used to be they were very cheap to replace. Now they're very hard to get because there aren't televisions that need the sweep. The sweep is all done electronically in today's tubes. And it's more by pixel than it is by anything else. But there is still a sweep in there. Leo S. enjoyed the Wild 803. Thomas R. Jackson leaves a aphorism in here, be all that you can be, but I guess this tube was being quite a bit. Now, this is an old video of mine I put together a long time ago. It's number 340. It's one of my most popular videos. Why 50 ohms? And the question is, why did the military settle on 50 ohms when a different impedance was best for transmit, a different impedance was best for receive? And I made the point that it was a stroke of genius to take two parallel wires and put one wire inside the other so that the electricity could get there without interfering with anything nearby. Victor says it makes sense to put the signal wire inside the shield because the grounded shield protects the inner wire from nearby wires inducing currents, which is kind of what I said in the video. Like I said, this has been, I think it's number 3 or 4 of my most viewed videos. The most viewed video is the one about shortwave listening. Leo is posting a clarification here saying Leibniz invented integral calculus, Newton invented differential calculus. Those are two sides of the same coin. And Heaviside invented what we call operational calculus. He invented a notation which he called operational calculus. It was quite controversial in its days, but it's used extensively to this day. I think I probably mentioned that Newton invented calculus without mentioning Leibniz. As in all discoveries, a lot of people are working on a lot of things, and it's almost impossible that someone else isn't working on something you're working on. I'll take as an example Elisha Gray, who invented the telephone and filed his patent 3 hours late after Alexander Graham Bell filed his patent. And so Bell had precedence. Elisha Gray's patents didn't go through because Bell had just invented the same thing. Imagine how different life would be if Bell had the flu that morning, or his tram derailed or something like that. I don't know. It's amazing how many people are working on things like this. Happy Home, in talking about vertical antennas and radials, says, love this. No way for you to know. Your info is influenced by looking hard at the DX Commander and associated thirst for information on radials. The DX Commander is an antenna. The antenna's fine. It works really well. You can tune it down to a net's hind end, and it has a separate radiator for each band, which is why you can do that. And you can do each radiator for which part of the band you want. Although from 40 on up, a single radiator will cover the whole band. The first video and the second video brought me quite a bit of flack from the DX Commander Crusaders. Even though I do recommend the antenna, I did not initially recommend the instructions, but later instructions 1.18 and any later are much better, and you can put the thing together yourself. It's actually very easy to put together. All the pieces just slide on each other, and if you undo the hose clamps, you can kind of collapse the thing and throw it in the back of a truck and take it on a portable like a POTA or something like that. Parks on the air. Okay, the Wild 103, another one that comes to mind from the 60s is the PT-15 used as a driver. Yeah, if it's used as a driver, it won't be near this big. In fact, in the Yaesu FT201, the driver's just a little miniature tube. Bass Angler 4073 says, very cool. I've played guitar for years and will use nothing but tube amps. Nothing sounds better. The transistor amps can get close, but they lack that low-end punch that will kick you in the teeth like a cranked EVH 5150 amp. There's a company called Western Electric, which of course was the manufacturing arm of Bell Labs. Well, it kind of fell into disuse, and a small group of people purchased the Western Electric name from AT&T, and they are now making tubes. as under the Western Electric brand. And they have great plans. We'll see how they do. I mean, they're adding one tube at a time to their repertoire, but they have some of the original machinery that was used to fabricate these tubes. Tubes, like you would imagine, think of this as a steam locomotive compared to the electric locomotives of today. Tubes, like steam locomotives, developed a very high degree of engineering. And they're actually electronic marvels. The reason they have been dropped is twofold. One, the filament. You've got to keep the filament lit. This filament alone takes 48 watts. 48 watts just to heat this thing up. That 48 watts adds nothing to the power output. The other problem was the high voltage power supply. This is the plate connection here. The high voltage power supplies are dangerous, require large and expensive equipment. And, you know, the AM transmitters of the day were large, heavy, and it took a lot of money to get something that had some serious power output. So on the AM band, the largest power allowed on clear channel stations is 50,000 watts. On FM, you can go considerably higher. Now, some people have pointed out on this tube, it will do Class C for telephony. Telephony means voice. Class C means it's only giving a little kick every so often to the tank circuit. If you use high-level modulation, I'm told that's okay. And that puts a lot less strain on the tube. Okay. Types of open wire line. I think I'll make some 500 ohm, which you can do. Is it okay to use 1.5 millimeter stainless cable? I would recommend not. Stainless, like all steels, is not that fabulous a conductor. Copper is much better, so you want copper in there. Now, you can make up for that by making the stainless steel much thicker and giving it more surface area by doing that. But overall, the reason we use copper, the best conducting element is, of course, silver. But nobody can afford silver wires. And silver wires aren't really very practical either. So some of the connections, the little connectors that you can get are silver plated. The problem with that is that they do tarnish, but the benefit of that is they are about 7% better conductor than copper. So I would make your thing out of copper if you can. You don't need to, well, you can make braided stainless if you want. I'm not sure I've ever seen braided stainless. It's braided tinned copper, I believe. Now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I may very well be. I've never made any open wire line myself. I know someone who did. It worked fine for him. An 803 is, Chris Johnson says an 803 is pretty cool, but I'd rather have a cold 807. There's a whole 800 series of amplifier tubes. 811 is the one I remember. Okay, this is Ton Bon Thurman. 17 hours ago, noob question. This is in Waterfall Displays Explain. It looks at 6:30 like you're receiving text messages through radio, which certainly can happen. Now, on this Waterfall Displays, I would have used let's see, it's SDR Uno software with an SDR Play RSB1A software-defined receiver. It is possible. I do occasionally use, let's see, what is it called? It's Dragon, Naturally Speaking, by Nuance. Dragon, Naturally Speaking. Because I have trouble with my hands, and sometimes I have to break down to dictating things. And sometimes I leave it on and it will just pick up casual conversation and transcribe it, sometimes very strangely. But I'm using a ham radio app on my phone just to listen in, and sometimes I find activity that doesn't sound like voice or even Morse code. Just a bunch of weird sounds, and I'm wondering if it's a different means of sending data. It is. It is, absolutely. These are the so-called digital modes, the most popular of which right now is called JT8. The J and T stand for the initials of the inventors. The T is Taylor. I can't remember who the J is. And FT8 is another person. No, JT stands for Joe Taylor. The FT is for, I think, a guy named Frank. And they together collaborated on a mode called FT8, which has taken the world by storm. If it was an open source program, the open source people are sort of like YouTubers. Their stuff is offered for free, but they really need donations to keep going. And that's why I'm always asking people to go to patreon.com/KE0OG and pick a way that works for you, or to go to dcasler.com/support. There's a couple additional ways. And if you look below this on the YouTube page, there's actually some merchandise there. Some of it's pretty old. I've got to get it fixed. It's iPhone cases for like the i6 and stuff like that. I need to get all that fixed. I'll have my assistant do that if I remember to tell him. But yes, there are many data modes on HF and on VHF. So take a look at the different things that are available out there. I have done videos on digital modes, so you might look for some of those. This is Glenn Martin. Thank you, Dave. I still have a fondness for vacuum tubes, but I'm grateful for the solid state gear. And I'm going to reply to him, you and me both, because I mean, this is magical. It's an evacuated tube. There's literally a vacuum in there, and it won't work without it. And there's a, down on the bottom here where you see it's kind of black on the inside, there's a little element called a getter down there, which is just connected to one of the voltages, and it tends to gather any gas remaining in the tube, and it causes it to heat up and splatter on the side of the tube. So what was gas becomes this black stuff down here to get a very, very nice vacuum. Now, one of the things that RCA liked to brag about was its technology for combining glass with copper, because as you notice right here, something has to penetrate the tube to go up to that plate cap. And getting it through there without letting any gas in is quite a little miracle of its own. There's a lot of technology in there that has essentially been thrown out, although the books are all available. This is from Terence in the UK, 2 Echo 0, India Papa Kilo. I know that older valves and tubes were big and bulky, but that tube sure looks cool. It is big. It's big because it's a power amplifier, and it is quite a big tube. And the fact that the filament still works after 80 years is pretty amazing. Robert Willis says, my RCA transmitting tube manual says that Class C rating for FM telephony is the same as Class C telegraphy, constant amplitude signal. Yes, that is true. You can use Class C for FM. Class A is completely linear. Class B is where you got two tubes. This takes care of the positive half. This takes care of the negative half. And there's a crossover in there that has to be dealt with, or you get what's called crossover distortion, which some people think adds a very nice warm feel to the sound. I'm among them. Then there's Class C, which is like if you're standing behind a child on a swing, you just give a little push, and the child goes out and comes back. And in electronics, you do that with the tank circuit. Tank circuit's got a capacitor and an inductor, and they're constantly swapping power back and forth. So if you kick it at just the right phase, you keep that thing going back and forth, and then you can take power off of that. And that's Class C. Now, are there other amplifier classes? Yes, there are. They're digital kinds of things. Okay, David, W5QDF, says he enjoys listening to his radio on his headphones, which I guess is what those icons mean. And this has to do with, does added loading affect the radiation pattern? Technically, no, but in real practice, of course, it's going to slightly. Pat Lawler, surprised to hear that you worked at IBM Westlake. Had a friend, Bob Shellhorn, whose name rings a very faint bell. There were 400 of us there. And then we moved up to IBM Boulder, took over building 2 and building 3. And there were 5,000 people at Boulder at that time. It's quite a few less now. Let's see, he moved from Ventura County to Colorado. Maybe 1984. That's interesting. I moved 1987. Does the name ring a bell? Not really. He said he worked in the basement, if that helps. The basement was the skiff. It was the place people went to work on highly classified things. And nobody was allowed in or out. You had to key in at the doorway and have the right badge. And then you had to make sure the door was pulled closed behind you. I have worked in skiffs on and off through the years. And you just, after a while, get used to the fact that you cannot tell anybody anything about what you do. You know, they would say something, you work for Northrop. Yeah, I work for Northrop. What do you do? Yeah, I work for Northrop. Well, what do you do there? Well, I work for Northrop. Who's your customer? Yeah, I work for Northrop. That's about how it goes. And we are also told that if people got too curious and started to pressure us, we were to report it, and the FBI would pay them a visit, which would usually put an end to any of that sort of stuff. There really are things going on behind the scenes that are keeping our freedom free. I've had the privilege of working on several of those. And there's stuff there that's truly amazing. Okay, so let's see if we can figure this out. Ola, Dave, where, let's copy, go up here to translation. .google.com, and we'll see if we can put this over here. And we'll put this in there. And what comes out is this: where can I get the latest firmware for the Mini 1300? The software to use it on the PC. Thank you in advance. Cordial 73. The answer is I don't know. You'd have to do what I would do in that situation, which is to go take a look on the internet and see what you can find. The Mini 1300, I believe, was open source. Now, what that means, if it's open source hardware, anyone can make the hardware, and do. You get a lot of Chinese copies. I think mine was one of those. And then there will be some open source page for the software. Now, I point out that on my live stream tomorrow, I have a live stream every Thursday evening at 7 p.m. United States Mountain Time. Now, we're on daylight savings time right now, so we're 6 hours off from UTC. But at 7 p.m. U.S. Mountain Time, not Australian Mountain Time. And we go for, it's not 7 p.m. either, it's 6:45 p.m. But if you tune in at 7, you'll get most everything. But 6:45 p.m. to about 8:15 p.m., we'll see. But tomorrow night is the drawing for the power supply. And there's a second prize, a small meter, that we're going to include in that. And you can enter that by sending to me an envelope sent to Dave Kassler, KE0OG, P.O. Box 98, Ridgeway, take the E out, Ridgeway, Colorado 81432, and down in the bottom, which giveaway it is, and your name and call sign. And what he has included in here is just a card that's got his information on it. You can send a postcard. Remember those? They still exist. You can send a QSL card. Now, I have had this happen to me twice, so I'm just going to mention it in passing, if I may. If you send a QSL card, you do not have to put a stamp both on the QSL card and on the envelope. Just put it on the envelope. If you do put a stamp on the QSL card, just send the QSL card. The way I sort these and so on, you can win anyway. Postcard, envelope, or QSL card will allow you to be the winner. I scramble them around, being very careful not to let anything fall out of them, because I do open them all. I do open them all to see, because sometimes people include letters. And so I'm very careful with the way I sort them. And then I put a finger in the middle and take the card that is on top of my finger. Okay? That way it does not discriminate against the smaller cards. So those work just fine. So let me also mention in passing again, patreon.com/KE0OG and dkassler.com/support. That keeps this channel going, keeps things perking along. And thank you very much for your support. This next month is the Dayton Hamvention. Right now, my wife and I are probably not going to go, just because it takes forever to get there. We're on the road definitely much more than we are at Dayton. It takes, I think, 4 days of pretty solid travel to get there. And then same coming back. And taking the motorhome is very nice, because we like the motorhome. It's much more comfortable than staying in hotel rooms and stuff like that, where you got to drag everything upstairs. And we take the Jeep behind us so that we can get around wherever we're going. One of our favorite places to go is Moab in Utah. It's very close to where we are, and they have lots of camping there and lots of fun things to see and do. So anyway, let me stop rambling. Thank you so much for being Augies or subscribers of this channel. And if you are not yet a subscriber, please do. It helps my stats with YouTube, and it persuades YouTube that more people want to see what's on this channel. Please also like and subscribe. And until we next meet, 73.